I think that's why we're seeing a lot of what we're seeing in our world today with all the chaos and all the deconstruction of old paradigms is because enough energy that's like expanding, right? Lighter energy, finer vibration. Because I don't like to say positive or negative or good or bad, right? But a lighter vibration, a finer vibration, that more of that energy is knocking out the denser energies. The denser energies are coming up to be healed so that they too can transmute and transform.
Hey friends, Irene Lyon here. I am so thrilled to share this long form interview with my good friend and colleague, Janet Raftis. We talk all things past life today, past life trauma. We talk about past life regression. We talk about distant healing and her early days getting into this world and learning that she had the gifts of being able to tune into psychic experience and a whole lot more. We get into that origin story with her, and we really dive into how we can heal the present moment by working with, of course, the present moment, but also the past lives that we have and the future self that we have yet to experience. We talk about the collapse of time. We get into a lot of juicy stuff. We mention many books and videos and extra resources throughout our chat. It's all linked up somewhere near this interview, so be sure to check these extra resources out to supplement the learning today. Enjoy.
So, Janet, we're here talking about past lives and specifically past life trauma. Before we get into details and nitty-gritty, when I just say those words or those concepts, what in your system, like what's the first thing that comes up, the first impulse?
So, that's a really interesting question because it's a very mixed impulse, I think.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that goes, ooh, and like almost tenses, but there's a part of me too that feels excited by it, right? Because it's almost like a contraction that can lead to a release.
Got it.
So even for myself and, you know, even thinking about as somebody who facilitates healings of past lives and sort of empathically tapped into what that is, there's almost always like a constriction and a potential for release happening at the same time, right?
Got it. That's interesting. When you feel that constriction, it's like this is like an SE session, but it's not. Like, is there any information in that constriction or is it purely somatic?
It initially, in the initial impulse, it's purely somatic. But then it's almost like my intuition drops into that space. And as soon as it hits that space, the information can start to rush in.
Got it. Got it. So you're going to be new to most of the people watching this. So anyone who's here, thank you for being here. Janet, thank you for being here. I want to just talk a little bit about you and how we met. And then if you want to let me know sort of your history, and then of course we'll dovetail this into why this is something I'm interested in. I've got some stuff I want to read that I think will be really great for people watching this. For many people, the idea of anything past life, anything soul, anything reincarnate that we can't see with our own eyes is elusive, maybe a bit scary, and almost like, is that a real thing? So, you know, and this was not something I was brought up with, even though I was raised Catholic via my mom. You know, it stayed pretty much in the current moment.
Right.
So I met Janet, obviously I met you through Smart Body, Smart Mind, the program I run. And we won't talk about that so much, but what was it that when did you know that this was your thing? Working at this spirit, psychic, universal, energy, healing level. Like, do you remember a moment in time? I'm sure, yeah. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So it's, you know, there definitely was a moment when I decided, okay, this is what I'm going to do. But really, this is something that has unfolded over the course of my lifetime. When I was very little, I could see energy. I could see it all around me. And I remember, you know, I had, you know, in my dysregulated nervous system growing up, I had trouble sleeping. I was an insomniac from a very young age. And I would lay in my bed at night and I would play with energy and make energy trails and do all sorts of stuff with energy. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know that that was not normal.
As far as we know it.
Right, right, right. And hopefully it's becoming more normal. But at the time, at some point I recognized that there was not a normalcy to it, right? And I was very empathic. I could really sense into the emotions of people around me, and in my nuclear family especially. There was a lot of repressed trauma, and I was very aware of it. It was very scary for me. I mean, I have something that I consider sort of empathic trauma from growing up, where my nervous system was always like this. Even though there wasn't any outward abuse or violence, I was constantly waiting for something.
That's super important. And just to kind of follow up with that, because I know a lot of the people watching this are interested in trauma and the nervous system and healing. And that's a really important point. I was just talking about this yesterday with someone, in that a lot of times we think trauma is this big, abusive, horrific, neglectful upbringing. And I'm grateful that you just said there wasn't necessarily that, but there was just this fear, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think most of us are pretty, we're all born with intuition, right? And
I agree.
To varying degrees, but we're all born with it. And children are very aware of the energetics of what's happening around them. And certainly when there is something like what I grew up with, or when there's abuse, our nervous systems have to wire themselves to be very, like, to have that sixth sense of it. Like, is mom drunk? Is dad, angry? What's going on, right? And so really you're using your intuition as a protective measure at that time. So I had that for sure, and always really knew that was something that was a part of me. I would have psychic experiences, telepathic experiences. Those things were pretty normal. But again, my sensitivities were problematic for me for the most part. And I spent most of my time, especially once I was a teenager, trying to not feel them.
To numb it all out.
Numbing it out. And I definitely was one of those people that turned to alcohol and drugs and other things, right?
Yeah.
So I really did a pretty decent job of numbing it for about 20 years.
A lot of people have done that, so you're not the only one. I'm curious, I don't want to lose your train of thought, but do you remember the first time, you mentioned the energy and dabbling with that. Do you remember the first time you had, like, what we would consider a psychic experience, or something that was more concrete than the energy playing?
Yeah, so I would say I don't remember like the first time, but what I remember very clearly is I always knew who was on the phone. I always knew what people were going to say. Like, all the time I knew what people were going to say. Exactly. Like, to the word, what people were going to say. Yeah. I knew what would happen a lot. And that was very normal for me. But it was also, again, something that I just really kept to myself. I thought it was weird.
Scary?
It was scary. It was. It was interesting because, simultaneously it was normal and scary.
Got it.
Right? And there was a wariness around it because of not wanting to know some things,
Of course.
Yeah. So I kept it, as much as I could. I really repressed a lot of it, especially, starting my teenage years. When I got pregnant with my son, from the time I saw that pregnancy test, which was very early in my pregnancy, within 2 weeks of being pregnant. I mean, I knew I was pregnant.
Yeah.
I knew I was pregnant.
You didn't need that test, but you needed to verify.
I needed to verify. And basically I saw the stripe on the thing, and in that moment I quit smoking, I quit drinking, I quit drugging, I quit everything. And what happened was that I was like, okay, I had been highly traumatized in those 20 years and not feeling any of it. And so all of my sensitivities came back online, and all of my trauma came back online.
Wow.
Like, all of it. And I was a mess. I mean, happy to be pregnant, but really a mess. And by the time my son was about going on a year old, it was showing up in physical symptoms.
Got it.
Yes, my skin broke out terribly. I was fatigued, and I didn't know how much. I mean, I had some postpartum depression going on. My husband and I, who's now my ex-husband, were having serious problems as a result, I think, of everything I was feeling and becoming aware of and didn't know how to deal with. I mean, all of my trauma was coming back. I was in a very serious freeze response, not knowing how to work with any of this. And then at the same time, I was also so sensitive. And so and I was living in a small town in Costa Rica at the time.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was there for 7 years, and Jake was born there, obviously. And coincidentally, I was doing some writing for a local newspaper, and I was connected with this woman who was a Reiki master, who had been somebody that I partied with, and then she had left Costa Rica. She'd gone back to the States. She'd become a Reiki master, come back, and they were like, hey, talk to Sarah about Reiki and write something about it. And I was like, okay. And you know how the universe works, right?
Yeah.
Like about a month before that, I got my hands on, so we owned a deli down there, and we had a book exchange. And this book called The Holographic Universe. Have you read that book?
No.
It's fascinating.
Okay.
And I recommend it to all skeptics.
Okay. I'll make sure to put that name down below in the section of the show more.
It's a great book.
I'll say it one more time, Holographic Universe.
The Holographic Universe, and it's by Michael Talbot. And he basically, it fell into my lap, and he explains psychic phenomenon through the lens of quantum physics.
Beautiful.
It was, I'm getting chills right now as I think about it. Like, it was what I need. Like, I was reading it going, oh my God, like, this is normal. Like, these things that happen to me are normal. Yeah. And then so right after that happened, a girlfriend of mine that I knew from when I lived in Argentina was traveling through Costa Rica, and she had become a Reiki master, and she gave me my first ever Reiki session.
And can I just, one interruption, can you define Reiki in like a short paragraph to those who have never, right? It's spelled R-E-I-K-I.
R-E-I-K-I, and it is basically an energetic touch therapy. So it's a hands-on healing modality. You can do it remotely though, but in its easiest, simplest terms, you just place your hands on somebody, you channel healing energy through your body and into the client, right? And heals on, physical, mental, emotional levels, spiritual level. So I had my first Reiki session, and I was really, really stunned by the fact that I could really feel it, and that she knew things, right? So here's somebody else using their intuition, and again, validating that mine is okay, right? And then, I get this assignment to talk to this Reiki master. And she was holding a class, and it was like, I knew I was supposed to take that class, right? Everything was up. So it was, after I learned Reiki, it all came back online again. And it all started happening. And to, cut to the chase, within a short period of time of really practicing Reiki and doing Reiki on myself and opening up to these alternative healing modalities, which I'd always kind of been into. Yeah. Like, I read some Einstein and used natural healing, but had always kind of kept it over here. Yeah. All of a sudden, like, I had permission to do all of this stuff. Yeah. And I really was doing it. And I started, seeing past lives very quickly within that framework.
And was it your own personal experience? Like, were you, and I'm going to share with you and everyone here how I stumbled across this work. Because again, I think we're given these opportunities for a reason, and it's a question of, do we take them or do we deny them and walk a different direction? It doesn't mean it's the wrong direction. And I think if something is thrown in front of your path, there's a reason for it, right? Yes. So do you, like, what was one of the first experiences? Was it deliberate? Did it just pop through you like popcorn?
The very first experience that I had personally was that I was doing Reiki on myself. And I visually saw, but also felt myself sitting on a wall and dangling my feet, my legs, and I could only see myself from about my torso down. And I had black skin, I was male, and I was about 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah.
That was the only glimpse that I had. That was just the first thing I ever, and I was like, and I, from my shoes and socks and shorts, I think it was like early 1900s.
Sure. And when you saw that image, it was like a memory.
It was like a memory.
Was there any part of you, and the reason I'm asking this is because I want to talk about this belief versus disbelief. Was there any part of you that didn't believe that that was you, but a different life?
No, it was like I just knew it. I could feel that it was me.
Yeah.
You know, in that moment, I could feel that that was me. And it was a knowingness that was all encompassing. So it was like, it was two things. And you might be able to speak to this as well. It's like, I could see, I was looking at myself from the external and feeling it as myself at the same time.
Exactly. Cool. So that is a great entry into, it's like we just did the trailer. And so I want to get into some specifics, but I'm going to share a story with you. I don't know if you know this story, and clearly no one else does because I haven't shared this before. But I have a book here. It's by Brian Weiss. I'll put this up to the Many Lives, Many Masters. I know you know this book and you know him. He's still alive. I hope to go to one of his workshops before he stops teaching. Have you ever seen him in person?
I've seen him in person at an I Can Do It conference, and he did do there were like 2,000 of us there, and he led us in a past life regression.
Okay, we'll talk about what that is too. But my story happened it would have been 2001, 2000-ish. I was doing my research in Australia at the University of Wollongong, which is just south of Sydney on the coast. And I mean, that seems like yesterday, but that was like 20 years ago. And I'm doing my grad work and I needed to get a book from the library. And I don't even remember how to use a library now, but then it was second nature. And I typed the thing into the computer. I got my piece of paper and my pen and I wrote down the call number. Remember that? You had to go to the library with its long, letters and numbers, stack 5, level 4. So I'm going through this library, looking. And I got to where it should have been the book I was looking for. We had to, for those of you watching, there was a printer thing that happened in my home. So we had to pause. It wasn't a ghost. It was my husband pressing print. So back to the story. I'm in the library. I still remember the section of the library looking for a book that was probably on what I was studying. So exercise science, omega-3 fatty acids, physiology, biochemistry, I don't know. But I was clearly not in the right spot. Later, I found out that section was on the other side. So I, wrote it down completely wrong. I am a little dyslexic, so it was probably something got turned around. But I'm like, using curiosity, which I teach my students and I know you are all about. I'm like, well, I wonder what's here. And no word of a lie, I looked exactly where it should have been, and this book was there.
Wow.
And I'm like, what's this? And I pulled it out and I looked at it, and it's the timeless classic, The True Story of a Prominent Psychiatrist's Young Patient and the Past Life Therapy that Changed Both Their Lives. And so to give context to everybody here who is very science-based and wants to see proof, he was doing hypnosis with a lot of his clients in his office, which is a very known way of helping people go back into current life memories to remember things and to heal things. And he was doing that with this woman, and she, very similar to what you were saying about your system getting unwell, she would have had what we would call chronic anxiety. She was getting depressed. She had these intense phobias of enclosed spaces and drowning and all these things that didn't make any sense. And so he started to hypnotize her, and they would do these regressions. And before he knew it, she was seeing something that made no sense to her current life in America in it was probably the late 1970s or early 80s. And they proceeded to work, and the whole book is a case study of all the various, not every session, but he recorded them, he studied them. He was dumbfounded because this was not taught in psychiatric medicine. He had to make a decision. Do I reveal this to the public? Are the people going to think I'm absolutely cuckoo? Because this woman was going through, it was like multiple past life experiences. A lot of it was painful, a lot of it was traumatic, and it all made sense with her fears, her phobias, her anxieties. And with each life, and I know you know this, but with each life they worked with, and she experienced often her death and then the peace that comes after it, the symptom that was attached, you know, in her physical now body would disappear almost too miraculously. He just thought, this is insane. So long story short, he, you know, documented this, finally wrote the book, started to talk about it. And interestingly enough, he would get phone calls and emails and other psychiatric peers of his saying, this is happening to my patients too, you know? And so he realized, holy cow, I'm not cuckoo. This is real. And I think the other thing fascinating is that when he would take her into these regressive states, that is very safe, you know, and you can take yourself out of it at any time, she would have also channeled information from other sources of the universe that was very much just these beautiful passages of healing and goodness and oneness. She knew things about his past, his life currently, that no one else knew. You know, he talks about a child that they lost as an infant, and that went down the whole path of karmic debt, you know, and why would someone take away this newborn baby? And it all got linked back to another lifetime of his, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, that was my introduction. And then, to be honest, you know, I read this book over the period of 2 days. I was just fascinated by it. And then I kind of forgot about it. And it wasn't until just a few years ago that I had an injury that didn't make sense at all, that I started to investigate, like, where is this coming from? Why did I just literally, Janet, I don't know if I told you this, my husband and I, Seth, we were in the Rome train station, Termini, and we were getting off of it. And I'm a pretty robust, strong girl, good balance, good proprioception. I'm walking through the marble, and no word of a lie again, I literally just fell over.
Wow.
For no reason. And there was no crowds. And even if I am in a crowd, I'm pretty good at standing my ground, literally. Yeah. I fell right over. My suitcase went with me. I hurt my knee a little bit. I was fine, but it was sore. Seth looks back and he's like, what happened to Irene? Because I'm not someone to just fall over on flat ground. And that started a process of uncovering an old injury that occurred in that time. And then I started to talk to you about more things, and who knows if we'll go into some of those lives. But I've seen enough, I felt enough, experienced enough to know, okay, this is for real. Clearly, he has more than one book. He has multiple books of case studies. To me, it can't be denied anymore. And even our students in Smart Body, Smart Mind are, as I bring this more up into the field, they're starting to understand the depth of their current day pain, suffering, things that they're really trying to heal, but they're just not getting any headway. So I would love to ask, like, at what point does someone, I don't want to use the word give up, because I don't like that word, that concept, but at what point does someone say, I think I should probably seek out another reason for why this ailment, why this symptom, why this phobia isn't going away, even with all this amazing therapy and work and nervous system healing? How would you answer that?
Yeah, so it's going to be very individual. And I think a big part of it really is to use your own intuition, right? Is to ask yourself that question, to be curious, right? Of like, is there something more to this? Is there something that is beyond what this physical lifetime is presenting?
Got it.
Right? And to be, you know, I have found it's interesting because people are different too. So some people can, some things you don't really like, there might be a past life component, but if you heal the this life component, it'll work backwards, right?
There's no time.
Because there's no time. Exactly. But
Yeah.
for some reason, there are things that are really resistant to healing until the past lifetime is addressed. And that has, I'm sure, to do with what we're here to learn, what we're here to experience, what we're here to open up to in this lifetime, right? There's something like being led to the past lives, like that in and of itself is a part of the journey that is so expansive. So if you had just healed this thing in this life, you would be missing a richness of everything that you're discovering now and working with now, and how you're able to help other people now as they go through this process, right? So I think it's really individualized, and it's just important to tune in and to speak with your, your healers, your support team as well, too, right? So check in with yourself, but also check in with your practitioners. Like, what's coming up for you, or what are you seeing in my body, right? That maybe I'm missing. And sometimes, I think even just having that willingness to be open can be huge. I had a client years ago. I hadn't been even doing energy healing for that long. She was a very open person, and we were having a healing session, and during the session, I saw her underneath. She'd fallen through ice. So I was seeing this past life of her. She'd fallen into ice, and she couldn't get back out, right? And she was swept away. I mean, just like in the movies, but this really happened. And afterwards I said, I saw this. I saw this. You were trapped under ice. You couldn't get out. You drowned in that lifetime. And, in the healing session, we just did regular energy healing on it, And she told me, she said to me, I am terrified of water. She said, I'm so scared of water, I can't even take a bath. She goes, I never swim. I don't take baths. I don't even like being in the shower. Right? She told me all of that. I had no idea. She then got back to me about a week later, and she goes, I have absolutely zero fear of water now. For her, it was super easy. It just released like that. Some people, it requires a little bit more, right? So again, just like in what the work that you do, we see that some things release super simply. Some have layers to them, and it depends on what we need from the experience, right? Or what our interaction is, what is coming to us through the experience.
Do you think that it is possible? There's two parts to this question. Again, I know many, not many now, but I used to know many people, because as you learn this stuff, your circles change. But many who refuse to believe in, say, an afterlife, in the soul, in anything that you can't physically examine with a microscope. It's very scientific, right? And I want to respect those who have that viewpoint, because that's their reality, and there's nothing wrong with that. What are your thoughts on, is someone able to work on those past lives, if we for the sake of saying they do exist, but if someone doesn't have that belief, are they then void of potentially having these deeper healing experiences? It's kind of, I don't know how to word it. Where I'm going to go with that?
Yeah. So I want to say like yes and no. So for example, it depends on their level of closedness to it, because some people say they're very closed, but they're actually really open.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Some people say they're open and they're actually very closed. So, some people, I've had people come to me and they're like, I don't believe in all that. My ex-husband is a great example of this. And he was very close to all of, he said he was very close to all of it. He was like, what you're doing is weird. I don't believe in it. You're a witch. He said some stuff like that. That man was more open to healing than almost anybody else I've ever worked with. I mean, I witnessed my first miraculous healings in him. He was totally open, even though mentally he would tell you that it was not true. And then I've had people come to me who are like, I'm so open. I'll do anything. And then you start doing the work and there's actually more resistance, right? It's more that they want to be open.
Yeah.
Or they are, for them, they're like, if they think they're open, then they think they're doing everything they can do, but there's still a part of them that's very defensive and shelled.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's almost unconscious to them. This actually came up recently in another thing where, I think I was teaching this in one of my courses, but I said, being embodied and aware has to be a somatic, visceral, like you have to taste it, you have to breathe it. And then there are many, and again, it's not their fault because it's protection, it's armor, who mentally are embodied. They can see the embodiment in their mind, but they actually don't realize how dysregulated they actually are in the somatic.
Yeah.
And I was reading a bit more of Brian Weiss's book, in prep for our call, and rereading some of his books. And one of the last stories I read was this guy who was just like, I want to do it. I want to get into this. I want to get regressed and figure out my past lives. And they would go into it and nothing would happen. And he got angry. So then there was all this survival energy. And then Dr. Weiss gave him these tapes, and anyone can buy his audio things and go through this themselves. And so his wife, who didn't really have any interest, similar to your ex-husband, it sounds like, she just popped them in, and she had all these multicolored images and things come up. And then he got mad at her because it was like, I am the one that wants this. You don't give a shit. And you're getting it all. And so he would go back to Brian and be like, what's up? He goes, let's see. And what occurred is he ended up finding not a past life necessarily, but more of a energetic guide that was like dressed in blue jeans and a ratty t-shirt with long hair, kind of like a hippie. And he said to him, and whether this is a real guide or his unconscious talking to him, doesn't really matter in some ways. He's like, dude, just chill out. Like, you got to let it flow. You're forcing it.
Yeah.
And if I think about even in, say, meditation practice and even the work that my students do, if they try to force the work with survival energy and more stress, it ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
And that in itself is a learning piece.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I like what you said about it depends on where a person is. If they're open, are they actually open or are they closed?
Yeah.
How would you define, we're talking past life, soul. So from what I know, and I'm, new at learning this, the soul is what remains and it gets passed on, right? So when our physical body meat suit expires, that the energy, the soul, and it's not always the case, but it transfers out into the abyss of the universe, and then it plunks itself maybe somewhere else. How would you define that?
So the way that I perceive it, this is through my experience, and I have a lot of experience with soul energy, right? Sure. But it's still through my filter. But really, this physical body that we have is one aspect of a soul field that is us, right? So my experience of source energy, which some people refer to as God, or spirit, or the field, or the matrix, right? Is that it's one massive infinite energy, right? And along this massive infinite energy, there are energetic imprints, almost like thumbprints, you can imagine, that are individuated things, right?
Good
so
example.
we're like a soul signature on this field. So we're a part of the field, but then on the field, so just like our thumb is a part of our hand, the thumbprint is one aspect of that, right? That's a part of our hand experience, right? So you can obviously imagine then our soul is this, and then, moving outward is the source energy that the hand is attached to, right? And it goes out and out and out. So we just happen to be able to see this particular frequency of energy, right? So it's like a field of energy that is identifiable as Janet or as Irene, but even, somebody can walk into your field and be a few feet away from you, but still sense Irene, right? And you as Irene can sense somebody's in my field, even though they haven't actually reached you yet.
Yeah.
If you're paying attention, right?
Yeah.
So really we have our soul is a big energetic imprint, and we are able with our physical eyes to see part of that imprint. And that's what we call the physical body. And the physical body is the densest part of that imprint.
Yep. Dense,
So
meaning like it's got mass,
yes,
it's got structure.
It's got what we call structure.
What we call structure, right.
Yeah, exactly. Because really, and there are lots of interesting studies on stuff like this. And another great book is called The Divine Matrix by Greg Braden.
Okay.
And I think it's in that, but he has a lot of books too. But in that book, he talks about this man who is a hermit. I mean, it's like your typical hermit story, right? It's in Asia somewhere. The hermit goes up to a cave and he lives in the cave for 30 years or something like that. But in this cave, and you can go to the cave and see this man had made handprints in the granite walls of the cave while he was up there.
Oh my God.
Just like clay, right?
Huh.
And what happened was the man was able to master his understanding of energy to some extent, right? And he recognized that even though we look at a stone and we say that it's super solid, we think this is solid, right? What he realized was that it's just energy and there's actually more space in here than there is matter. And so he was able to put his hand into it. We are like that. And that's why energy healing works, right? Because we're actually made up of like photons of light, right? There's more empty space than there is space. But our eyes are trained to see this frequency. And because we can see this frequency, we have a perception of it being solid.
And that's all that's real.
And that's all that's real. Because that's what we see and what we've created as our reality. Right? So really, if we thought we could stick a finger through our hand, we would be able to do that because it's more empty space than solid space. And science has proven that. That's not me saying science has proven
that. And that connects to the book that you mentioned at the beginning, the quantum, I forget the title.
The holographic universe.
The holographic universe. This is part and parcel of all that. It's what we would see in the movie What the Bleep that started to talk about the quantum energy field, that we can shift things with our mind, with our energy. It's what the secret is in a strange way. It's even, as you were talking about, being able to put your hands through things and move energy, I think of some of the classic movies that we were brought up, at least me and you might have been as kids, like Indiana Jones, where the medicine, where that crazy guy like puts the hand through the heart.
Yeah.
It's scary, but it's like in some places, we say that that's possible. If we think about even the current Star Wars movie, how, Skywalker, Luke moved himself to another place.
Yeah.
Would that all, I understand this, but from those like physical structured things, this is how that's explained.
Exactly. And in the holographic universe, there's actually an example of a man who is able to do that, to disintegrate and reappear. Within like the last 100 years, this has been documented. People saw it, right? So
again, it's that teleportation, it's Star Trek, it's like light speed. It's really, it's magical. And yet what I know and what you know way more than me is that it's magic, but it's also very real.
But it's also very real, exactly. Yeah. And so the more we can understand our soul energy that way, right? And that this is something like when our physical body dies, right? The energy that we identify as our physical body, really it sheds, but the soul was always there. Right? The soul is the container. It is the thing. And then the soul decides that it wants to know physicality again. And so it creates an environment where it can become dense in a place. And according to our physical laws, right, our DNA and genetics and all of that, the energy organizes itself in such a way to be born into something that will look like this. And we can see this too in like a salamander, right? If a salamander's tail gets cut off, it regrows, right? Yep. Because the etheric template, the soul template, holds the space of that tail. And the salamander, I don't know how, I tend to think that all animals are extremely intelligent for their own species, right? And so a salamander just doesn't hold the belief that we hold, that if you get an arm cut off, it can't come back, right?
Yes.
So, and you can look energetically at people who have lost a limb, and the template is still there
Still
for
there.
it. And that's why they have phantom pains and all these things happen. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a really good example, actually, because I haven't had the pleasure of working with someone with phantom limb pain, but I've watched it in classes with Peter Levine, and it's painful when one hasn't healed that shifting, that shedding of the physical. It's almost as if that soul imprint, as you're saying, of say the arm or the leg, because those are really the things that we can lose without dying, that it is there.
Yeah.
And when I watch him work with these people, he is doing, Peter is very magician, like very much with the energies, although he doesn't talk about it as much in his books. I've found that those that have lifted up to that level of mastery, you have to work at that level. And he would essentially do what we would call soul retrieval with the limb. And it's the same with, for those students of mine that are listening, I've talked about near-death experiences, surgical trauma, working with a body of work that he calls Eye of the Needle. And I was talking to my husband, Seth, about this, who's also one of our practitioners, and you know him. He said, Peter's basically doing soul retrieval work when he's doing Eye of the Needle work. Because we go under anesthesia, or we almost go into that light, which has been documented enough times to know that's what happens when we almost die. It's like we've been trapped. It's like in this limbo, right? Yeah. And not everyone that has a near-death experience has a beautiful re-entry.
Yep, very true.
Right? And so it's kind of like we're trying to bring that, it's like would you say that the soul can get trapped in another spot?
It's like we become at odds with ourselves in a way, right? And it's like, I think what happens a lot in that experience is that the soul is like, come home, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, the soul's also like, but I'm not done.
I have to keep going.
Have to keep going. I haven't done what I came here to do. Right. And then we see that in people who have documented NDEs, right, is that there's often a decision there, right? And the decision to come back, even if they're like, I don't really want to go back, you know, their guides are saying, and like, you know, you have to. And they're like, really? Are you sure? Yeah. And they're like, no, you have more work to do, you know? So I think it can be extremely traumatic to come back in, you know? Even I think some people who astral travel have tough re-entries at times.
Yeah, no, I agree. And there's actually a wonderful movie. Have you ever seen the movie The Hereafter?
No, I haven't.
It was, I think it was directed by Clint Eastwood. And it was Matt Damon and a few other actors that are a little Hollywood-ish. But it follows 3 parallel timelines of people in the world. He is a psychic. Who really is struggling with his gifts, and it came out as a result of an injury. I think it was a high fever as a child, which often these things spark up afterwards, a near-death experience. But it shows him, but another woman who had a near-death experience in a tsunami, and I won't give it away because it really shows the healing potential of accepting where we're at in the physical body. Right? And I'm now here, and I better work with what's here, which leads me to the next piece, which is, you know, a lot of people ask, so if I want to heal these old lives that ended maybe really horribly, really unjustly, which tends to be the case from what I've experienced, at least personally and with others and reading the books. And I know from my work, it's all about working with the current moment and what's there. Would you have anything to add to that other than the basics of how we would work with the nervous system and emotions and memory?
Yeah, so again, it's going to really be dependent on each case. So, you know, what we've seen is that sometimes working on the current nervous system with this past life trauma can be super healing for that trauma and really necessary. It's almost like that experience of trauma, because it's still hanging out in the field, needs that process of re-regulating itself in a physical form.
Got it.
Sometimes it's easier than that, like the case of the client I shared who had drowned, right? I mean, and again, you know, sometimes it's just like, it is just like magic, right? And sometimes there's a little more work that goes with it. The other thing that I've really noticed is the repressed emotional component of it, the repressed emotions. So it's like a lot of times, so we think about it, right? Like at the point of any traumatic death, any death probably, but it's certainly a traumatic death, there is a lot that's going on in that moment, right? I mean, there's like anger, fear, grief, you know, I mean, there's so much. And nervous system is super activated and you're being flooded with all of that at the time of death, right?
Yep.
And so it's almost like it short circuits it, right? Like just what happens in trauma in this lifetime. But then you know, the soul leaves the body, blah, blah, blah. But the soul still holds the energy because everything is energy.
Yes.
So the energy is still there. It may not be there in the same way. It may not be, you know, let's say you had one of these really traumatic experiences in the past life and you did live through it, right? And you would probably process out some of it then in that lifetime.
Yeah.
You know, at least a little bit of it.
Yeah.
If you didn't do healing work, some of it would re-regulate, right? But it gets stuck there. And so energetically, it's still in your field because everything that's ever happened to your soul and in your soul history is there in your soul's field.
It's always there. It's like
always there.
It's so interesting. So hold your thought about the emotions and the Big Bang. But it's like, I guess, again, with the way that we as humans have been trained to see what we would call the third dimension, like the 3D physical gravity here. You know, I've got my cup of water here, right? A mug of water. I can't fit any more water in this than maybe a cup.
Right.
If I was to take this, you know, more water, it would just start flowing out.
Right.
So, and again, how would you, is there an analogy of seeing how this one soul can hold memories and energies and experiences of, say, 100 lives? Because as he talked about in this book, I think in the end, they process 36 different past lives, which seems monumental when you think about it. It's like you couldn't fit all those lives and all that energy in this one cup of water.
Right. Yeah.
So how does the universe do that?
Right.
I'm testing you.
Yeah. No, and this is going to be kind of I have not answered this question before, but I have like a perception of it, right?
Try.
So our soul, remember I said that it was like an imprint, right? That's connected to the larger field.
Yeah.
So the field's infinite. So truly, actually, our soul is infinite. Right? And it's holographic, right? And so it kind of folds in and onto itself and is infinite in that too. I mean, it's infinite in all directions, which is something we can't quite wrap our hands into, but going into the finger, it's going to be just as an infinite experience as going out of the finger. Yeah. It's just infinitely inward. Like, so where does this go?
Well, and the physical thought I had, or the structure I'm thinking about as you say that, when you say it folds, and with my students, I've been teaching them to see and feel things holographically a bit more recently. And I often joke and I often say, like, the curriculum is linear, like 1, 2, 3. And I say, I hate that because that isn't how it really works inside. But we have to, because of the way we're currently learning as humans, at least now, in the 3D, we need to see a list. We need to make sense of order. Yeah. But when it's a livable, breathable experience, when you are regulated, let's just say, to use a nervous system example, there's no order to how you process a traumatic event. Right. It just occurs. Right. And so when you were talking about the folding, the one structure that I thought about to give some people like a little bit of a concrete, if you think about the digestive system, or even the lung tissue, and I forget the equivalent, but I think the digestive system, if you were to unravel it with all the all that stuff in the gut, it's like the size of or maybe it's the lung. I haven't done anatomy in ages, but it's like the size of a football field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To think that whether that's
Bodies, right?
insane. So, but it's because it's folded,
Mm-hmm.
right? Over
Yeah.
and over. And that's why it can be that big.
Yeah.
Is that
And
one
with
way of looking
energy,
at it?
there's no, okay, so we have a perception that there's a barrier in this physical energy, like we talked
Yeah.
about before. But
Yeah.
really in energy, there is no boundary. There is no,
there.
so it can be folded in unto itself.
Forever.
Exactly, forever. And so that's how that happens.
Got it.
So it is an interesting thing. So when let's say that I'm working with someone, and let's say, either in a healing session or in an intuitive reading, I'll get a flash of something that's being held in their field,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's like I'm seeing a picture over here, or a picture over here, or a sensation over here, from a different lifetime, from the future, from whatever, from the past, wherever it might be, right? It doesn't even necessarily mean that that's where it is in the field.
Got it.
It just means that there's a vibrational resonance of that thing that I'm being shown within the field.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I'm perceiving it. But it actually all exists all together at the same, right? There's no time or space.
Yeah.
And we have a hard time wrapping our 3D minds around that. Mm-hmm. Because we like to have order, like you said. We need to, like, if there was no time, oh my God, to us it seems like terrifying.
Let's
right?
touch on that actually, because I kind of joked a little moment ago, because there is no time. I said that, and I know that from the work I've studied and working with you and Seth, but because there is time, like you and I had a scheduled time to show up at 1:30 Pacific today. So in this current reality that we have, there is a linear timeline.
Right.
And then there's this other thing that is being talked about more and more. And the more I enter into this work with my students, working with their nervous systems, we're playing with all past and future at the same time.
Yeah.
Which, when you look at it from a nervous system perspective, don't even put the past life stuff in there. They're remembering and feeling and being with a response that occurred when they were maybe in utero.
Yeah. Yep.
Or it's a memory of their mother's childhood in the DNA.
Yeah.
Or when they fell off their bike when they were 5. But they're experiencing it right now.
Yep. And they can heal it right now.
And they can heal that old stuff right now. Yeah. So because I think that's really exciting, because that shows we can really change the history.
Yeah, totally. I have a really great example of that I love, because for me, when I learned distance healing, I learned there's no time or space. And conceptually, I was like, okay, there's no time or space, but I didn't really get it.
Yep.
Until I had a session set up with a client of mine who lives in Denmark. This was many years ago now. And we had, scheduled the appointment for 9 a.m. Eastern time. And I, took my son to school. I came home. I was settling down, getting ready to facilitate the session. And I recorded the sessions through my phone. So I picked up my phone and I saw that there was a message from her. And I look at the message, and in the message says, "Oh my God, that was the most powerful healing session we've ever had." And I was like, what? Really? Because I haven't started yet. So she got the time difference confused.
Oh.
She had sat to receive the healing at what would have been 8 a.m. Eastern time.
Okay.
Received the whole healing, right? Yeah. So I was like, don't tell me anything about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to do the healing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do the recording of it. And then we'll talk, right?
Afterwards. Yeah.
Everything that she experienced in the session was what was on that tape, on that recording when she got it, right? Ooh. I mean, it was fascinating for me, right? It was really cemented it. I mean, it was like she lined up like very physical things. I could feel so much in my stomach. And then you were there working on my solar plexus, and it was so intense, and it was this and that. And you said there was this memory, and I felt that memory. Like, it was crazy.
That's a pretty accurate way of proving to oneself.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a real thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, in healing too, to speak to your specific example of going back and healing things from childhood and even in utero,
Yeah.
what's happening is in that collapse of that time wave, right? We're bringing it into the absolute nowness. So we really can completely redesign the past.
Yeah. And the future.
And the future. Yep. And the parallel. If we want to go further. Which
that's another.
Yeah, right. But it's like, but we really can. And in that accessing, and that's why I think the nervous system work can be so powerful, right? Is because you're really feeling and allowing what got stunted earlier in life, that experience that, like for me, the freeze response is so huge, right? So for me, all those times I was feeling things, I was in freeze. And that for me, I couldn't speak. So I couldn't even utter my emotions because that communication completely shut down. So for me, when I went back and did the healing, like to be able to sit with 4-year-old Janet and let her like have that emotional response move through me, right?
Yeah.
Then that was a powerful way to move that energy, and that also was regulating my nervous system at the same time, right? And even in your work, what was so yours is physical. You are touching your body, but it's so gentle. It's very energetic, right? And so here you are in these very soft and subtle movements, and it's bringing up stuff that has been, trapped in the body for years. And then I had very vivid memories when I was going through the SBSM, very vivid memories come up from years ago that were being like gently allowed to release. And so it was earlier life healing, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned the parallel universe. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but have you seen the show? Oh gosh, I'm going to forget. It's a Netflix series. I think there's been 2 seasons. OA, the original.
Yes.
I mean, for those of you watching this, if you want to get a dip into the concept of parallel realities, that show is just, I mean, it's got trauma in it all over. But they did such a beautiful job of teaching and bringing you through these different parallel realities with the same people, and it blew my mind. I know that after watching that, I had to kind of restructure how I saw things a little bit. So anyway, I wanted to know if I'll link that below, but OA is very good. Such a great show. The other thing you mentioned was distant healing. And I know we're kind of jumping on different topics here, but again, it falls into this matrix. And the example with your client in Denmark, people might say, I know of people who are skeptical about doing a reading or doing a session where you're not in the physical room with someone, and yet it's working. I've seen it work. Linda Taggart's work is very good about distant healing. This is where prayer comes from. And group prayer. She's shown in the lab that works. There's a reason why people pray together. And yet it was interesting because she said that the studies and the research around that all got wiped back in the day because it was just too risky. It was too powerful. We couldn't give people that power to heal and change. How do you, and I know that we've talked about my past lives and healing aspects that I used to do. And back in the day, you were, as a witch, burned at the stake. And we know that through the history, the burnings and all of that. But where do you see like how that got shut down? It was the way that we healed holistically, naturally. And then it got shut down. And it kind of feels like now in the year 2020, we're revisiting a lot of this stuff. How do you see this starting? Do you have a psychic feel of what's in the like what is being conjured up energetically as more people wake up to this? Because, and I'll say one thing and I'll let you talk, more and more of my students And I mean, I'm priming it by putting it out into their field. I'm talking about it. I'm
Right.
dropping the past life word now all the time. They're starting to be curious.
Right.
There's no one 20 years ago, even 10 years ago or 5 years ago would have considered to press play on this video.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So where do you see it moving forward? Or if there's no time, where do we see what is the holographic field that you are tuning into with what's going on globally right now?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me just say that your aura is a really beautiful turquoise color right now.
Okay. Did it just change?
It changed, yeah, and it got really vibrant, yeah.
Cool.
So that's one thing. So what is happening through my lens, right? As somebody who's been in this field for about 20 years, and is changing so much, and it is a cumulative effect, and a person, right? So as each person comes online with this, as each individual has what's called a spiritual awakening, but it's really an expansion. I mean, it's going to be different for different people, right? But people are experiencing energetic expansions. They're doing a lot of healing work as a result of it, because as you go through this so-called awakening, you have to clear out the denser energies. And so more people are recognizing that they need healing work, and then they do the healing work and they become even higher vibrational, and then they have more and more awakenings, and they're starting to have their own experiences with it. So even people doing what would be considered a physical healing modality, right, which is your work, are really starting to notice the energetic capacity, because they are, as they go through healing, they are clearing out denser vibrational energies. And that is allowing them to go into a more expansive state, which is allowing them to become more attuned to the subtle realms and the subtle energies. Their intuition's coming back online, and they're starting to notice things, and they're starting to have experiences where they're like, I did feel this thing that happened when I was 3, and I could really feel that I was 3, or I did have a glimpse of a past life, or this thing did happen, right? It is like, and as you know, as Mary has the experience, then Mary talks to 3 of her friends who feel safe about it. She might not tell all of her friends, but she tells 3 of her friends who she feels safe with, and those friends are like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I'll have a session with Janet, or maybe right.
I'll start healing.
Totally. So it's having a domino effect for sure. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot of what we're seeing in our world today, with all the chaos and all the deconstruction of old paradigms, is because enough energy that's like expanding, right? Lighter energy, finer vibration. Because I don't like to say positive or negative or good or bad, right? But a lighter vibration, a finer vibration, that more of that energy is knocking out the denser energies. The denser energies are coming up to be healed, so that they too can transmute and transform. And then there's just one more thing I wanted to say. You know, we were talking about the distance healing, and really distance healing is the exact same idea as past life healing. Got it. Right? Because in either one, there's no barrier of time and space. We're the ones who have the construct of there being barriers of time and space, but there is not. So the same mechanism that allows somebody in Denmark to sit and receive healing from me and have a tangible, visceral experience. Yeah, exactly. Is the same thing, right? Very scientific term there. Yep,
I use it all the time.
For that past life experience to happen.
Great. I'm glad you connected those two. And the other connection I want to make, so correct me if I'm not accurate here, when you say dense or heavier energies, to me, at least in my form of work, those are the dark, deep memories, the emotions, the things we never said because we couldn't, the pain that we couldn't feel because it wasn't safe to express it. So it's dark, and we call it the dark stuff, the sludgy stuff. I sometimes call it the gremlins that are hiding. But it's an energetic, it's a physical, it's a sensation, it's a memory. And you know, the one thing that's so fascinating is 50 years ago, for example, when our parents were our age, they were not talking about this.
No.
On a Zoom call. You know, there wasn't this desire to talk about how we hold energy, I mean, we didn't even understand that intergenerational trauma existed when our
Yeah.
parents were our age. It was just
Mhm.
not there, just as we didn't think that somebody could recover from a stroke,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or that, when our grandparents were really young, that you could put a plane into the air,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? I still am amazed by that, and yet it happened. It defied physics.
It totally, right? It
And
absolutely does.
now
It's supposed to be.
and now it is physics. And so I think there's just this, I heard a little while ago, it was a Aboriginal grandmother that was channeling, and she was talking, I don't know if you saw it. I'll find it and post it,
Mhm.
but I think it was her that said, that the earth, the universe is expanding.
Mhm.
And again, it comes back to that thing, like we can't fit it all in a cup. Like there's this
Mhm.
infinite piece. It's
Mhm.
expanding, and it's demanding that the life forms on the planet also expand.
Yep.
Would you say
Because
that's
we're part of it, right?
what
So
part of the universe? Yeah,
it's stretching us out.
literally.
Yeah.
Even though we're physical, it's opening up our capacity.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing, and I'll speak to this quite frankly, is those who are pushing against this possibility, who
Mhm.
don't want to heal the old stuff.
Yeah.
And then the thought I had was, again, our parents' generation, typically, not all parents, not all humans were like this in the 50s and 60s
Yeah.
and 70s, but they were brought up with, oh, that happened so long ago. Like
I
that was
forgot.
ages ago.
Yeah.
That was when I was a kid. That isn't affecting me now. And again, it's not their fault. It's just that they didn't know at the time
Yeah.
that the nervous system could carry that trauma.
Mhm.
And so with this expansion, I'm also feeling a lot of folks that I see who are struggling right now, like truly mentally struggling and physically struggling, are struggling because there isn't this potential curiosity of this
Mhm.
possibility,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How would you speak to someone who's just still on that, no thank you? Like for
Mhm.
those individuals that have that, not for me,
Mhm.
like how do we work with that? Or do we work with it? What's their like?
Yeah, so what I've typically done, and this happens, usually what happens is that it's like one of my clients wants her husband to try
Ah,
it, or
yes, of course.
right? But when I actually talk to people who are like that, or people who, and I want to say, speaking to what you were talking about a few minutes ago, I used to get a lot of "that's really weird," and "it's not for me,"
Mm-hmm.
and I rarely get that anymore. There's at least curiosity usually now, right?
Mm-hmm.
But first of all, I never try to convince anyone. I mean,
Yeah.
I will share information. I
Yeah.
will, if the person's open to it, I will share some experiences. And
Mm-hmm.
usually the person is at least open to hearing something.
Mm-hmm.
I often recommend books, because
Yeah.
that helped me so
Yeah.
much. That was a massive shift for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when people read somebody, Michael Talbot was a science writer. Greg Braden was an actual rocket scientist.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
he's now a metaphysician and
Mm-hmm.
writing about all this, but he worked for one of the aerospace companies, right? So when people are exposed then to somebody, or Brian Rice, who had a really hard time bringing that all out into the field,
Definitely.
he struggled with that.
Yeah. And I'm
You know?
even thinking of, I'm forgetting the name, but he opened the Institute of Noetic Sciences in California.
Mhm.
He was
Mhm.
part of NASA, and
Yeah.
Edgar Mitchell, again, like these, like, it seems like those who push the envelope of science
Yeah.
and push it to the point where they see the universe in a different way.
Yeah.
There's like something that shifts.
Yeah.
You know what I
Absolutely.
mean?
Yep, absolutely. And what happens is most of us, we're not taught to push science
Yeah.
that way. We're not even taught to be curious with science.
Yeah.
We're taught that they're still teaching Newtonian physics.
I know.
Right? I mean, it's been disproven, and they're still teaching it. And a lot of our medicine, our Western medicine, is based on that model.
Yeah. Cause
Okay?
effect.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really, it is about curiosity, right?
Mm.
And again, like, and this as well as I do, is we can't change anybody's mind. We can show them if they're willing to look at things, right? And that's what I try to do. And I think, you know, part of, I think what is one of the things that's changing, and when I first started doing this work, I think I was accessible for a lot of people because they were like, you're grounded, you're, you know, I cuss and I, you know, like I'm approachable. Yeah. I'm not like even though I am airy-fairy in some ways, I don't present as that, right? And
you're not wearing a big purple muumuu with crystal balls all around you.
Exactly, right? And so and I think that was really helpful for a lot of people. Like I was just a regular person, right? And so, but I think there are more and more regular people getting into these fields, and that's helping. You know, that is opening some things up. My dad has opened up a lot to this. My mom, not that she's close to it, but she just isn't interested in it, right? More than anything else. But my dad, you know, my dad had a healing miracle with me, you know, and early on, and so he was like, this is pretty fascinating, you know, and he doesn't think about it the way I do. He doesn't talk about it. He was very scientific. He was, you know, an electrician and trained in some engineering and had a science, but was atheist when I was growing up, you know, and now he's like, the door's cracked open and he every once in a while steps through it. Not all the time. But sometimes it does, you know, and it's cool when it does.
I think that's important. So no, I wanted to ask that because it is, I do agree. And that's a good example you said about when a client comes in and they bring their, usually it is the woman comes and it's the husband that they want to change, or it's a child, or it's, you know, very rarely is it the other way around, although I have seen it happen, right? But yeah, we can't, what's the saying? We can lead a horse to the water, but we can't make them drink.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Speaking of horses, actually, and what I want to do, I think you know where I'm going with that. But what I would love to do is we've kind of danced in some spaces, and I think this is a good intro. And the one word, and then I want to actually do something kind of practical but different. How would you define past life regression? Because if you read Brian Weiss's books and the other books on past lives and healing past life trauma, they call it regression. And it's a funny word because it might kind of feel like you're going, I mean, you are going backwards, you're regressing, but it's not a negative thing. So how would you explain if someone wanted to work at this level? And as I'm seeing, it doesn't take a lot. You just need to be open to it and open to your body, because that's where the old soul imprints are existing. How would you use, if it was past life regression for dummies, what would you explain? How would you talk about what that is?
So a past life regression is a modality, and that uses hypnotherapy.
Got it.
To take you to another point in time, which is also very relative, right? And so that is just one way of defining how you can access past lives.
Got it.
Happens to be a pretty powerful way for a lot of people, right? But it's just one way. And so in my work, for example, because I'm not typically doing hypnotic regressions, it's more that there is a past life experience expressing itself.
I see.
Right? So it's a little bit different. But it is, again, we want to come to this place of there not being any time really. So the same way that, and you said for dummies, so I don't want to get too complicated here.
Okay.
But the way that we talked about healing an experience when you're 3, right?
Yeah.
Because it's also, we have put it on a timeline because it helps our mind to organize the information.
Yes.
But in the energy, that experience is happening right now.
Yeah, in that holographic folding that we were talking about.
Yes, exactly.
It's all now.
It's all happening now.
Okay.
So that past life is also happening now. It's not actually really a past life. But because we see ourselves in a time that we have defined as the past, right? We might see ourselves dressed a certain way or have an understanding that we're in an ancient civilization in Mesopotamia, for example, right? We have decided, historians have decided that happened in a certain year, right? But energetically, it's all happening right now. It's a big soup, right?
Exactly. Got
Right.
it.
So we can access any of those. Same thing with, and Brian Weiss talks about healing future lives, or going to future lives, right? And doing healing work there.
Yes.
Same thing. We can also heal future lives, which will bring healing to this life as well, because it's all interconnected.
I've played with some of that with our students using some of the Arcturian learnings that I've done at seeing
Nice.
that hologram forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's intense and it's complex because you're not just dealing with the present moment, you're going into the sensations and the visuals and the auditory future. But it is a way to imprint what we want. And I mean, that comes back to the whole law of attraction, you know, and what I've found is that a lot of people are like, oh, this doesn't work. You know, I'm envisioning all these things and it doesn't work. But what I've seen is that if someone is like truly in their nervous system,
Embodying it,
and embodied it, but if it's just a journal where you're all mind-based, then it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Because to come back to that infinite, you know, folding of infinite energy, it's the entire physical system that has to be cellularly online with that possibility. Make sense?
That's exactly it. That is exactly it. Yeah. And so we can go, so to heal now, we can also go to a future version of ourselves, embody the future version of ourselves, which will bring the healing, because it collapses that wave then, right? It's actually happening simultaneously. It's the healing to the here and now.
The healing of that. There are two books that came to mind, and then I want to talk about the horses. But again, it's another past life book called Old Souls. And again, I'll post this below, but it's a lot of accounts of children. So again, for those who are like, I'm not so sure, you know, there's many accounts of children who, for no reason, can speak a foreign language that they've never heard, they've never been taught, and it's not even in their country.
Yeah.
And stories of things that they can tell you about the past.
Yeah.
And it, you know, it was when I read that book, because I still wasn't so sure after my first experience with this book. I'm like, let's look into this a little bit more. And then I read these stories of these children, like going into homes, knowing where things were, who the family was, and this child had never visited this village. It was somewhere in the Middle East. And it turned out that that family, a year or years before, around when that child would have been conceived, had lost very traumatically their young son in a car accident.
Wow.
And it was just so eerie that that soul left that traumatic incident and inhabited a little person, a new human, so close. Right? It was, because it doesn't have to be there. It could be anywhere.
Yeah.
And I can't remember. I want to reread the book, but you know, this man took his little son. I think he was maybe a carpenter or a plumber, or electrician, to his house. And as soon as this little boy walked in, he started talking to the mother and to the brothers as if they were his family, and he had never been past his home village. And it's just like, you can't make that shit up. Like he's not playing a hoax.
No, exactly.
So anyway, for those of you that want to read some of those things, again, Old Souls was the book. I'll post it below.
I want to share one similar story.
Please.
I think it's so much fun for people to do. I definitely want to check out that book. And there are great stories from kids. There's this one that made the news, and everybody can look it up on YouTube. And it is about a little boy who was born in the United States. And around the age of 4 or 5, he started drawing pictures of fighter craft in World War II.
I've heard about this.
Oh my God. And there was like they were shot down, all this stuff. And he like was saying like, little man, little man, little man. And he was like talking about these people that were in the planes, and he knew their names, and all this stuff happened. And he was really struggling with it. It was very traumatizing for him, actually. Yeah. And his parents were finally like, we have got to check this out. Like he knew like what type of airplane it was, what the name of the airplane was, what the model of it was, like everything, small details and names. And so they went, and he gave them enough information for them to research and find this squadron of fighter pilots who were these men that he was talking about. And he was able to, say who he was.
Yep.
And once they had his name, they were able to trace down his sister, who was still alive.
Oh, wow.
And he described things that the sister had in her possession that nobody would have known about except for him in his previous lifetime.
Oh, wow.
Like she had never, like pictures. I mean, it's crazy. It's a beautiful story. It will make you cry. I'm not going to give it all away. He had some resolution at the end. They did some healing work with him. And once it was all resolved, he wasn't traumatized by it anymore.
Wow. We'll find that clip and put it up, because that's, again, one of those other beautiful stories where it's so hard to deny that.
Yeah.
And I was talking about this today in a training call with my students. Like, if you have a child who's 5 years old and starting to talk, and they tell you a story, it is traumatizing to them. It's a micro trauma to not believe it.
Yeah.
To say that's silly. How many times were we I was lucky, thanks Mom and Dad. No one ever told me that my stories were stupid or silly.
Right.
But many are.
Yeah.
And that's the start of our intuition and our creativity being shut down, to bring it back to the nervous system.
Yeah.
And I always say, like, if you ever have an opportunity to be with a child that hasn't been poisoned by being shut down and is frozen, and they can talk and they still have that wonder of magic, ask them what their life was like when they were big. Do you remember what it was like in your other life? And I've done this with some kids, and it's not to pry or to be, but it's like, do you remember? And most of them, again, if they've been brought up in a regulated household where this expression is allowed, they'll just start telling you. And a lot of people will think, oh, you're making that up. And no. And even if they are, it doesn't matter. They're showing you their creativity and what their brain is telling them, and their body, right?
Yeah.
So I've been teasing people with the horses, because I want to end with just a more concrete example of something that you and I worked with.
Yeah.
And, it was so interesting to me, because I had already worked on some past life stuff, especially that piece around falling over in Rome, when I was in Rome, and it involved a horse. And I know it wasn't you that worked with that with me, but shortly after that, I was experiencing a lot of physical pain down my spine and fascia, and it didn't make any sense. It had no qualities of my old accidents, because since I've actually opened up and healed a lot of current lifetime traumas around concussions and whiplashes from my days in sport. But I remember reaching out to you, and I'm like, something just doesn't make sense. Like, I have so much pain. It doesn't make sense. I haven't had a hard workout. My relationship is amazing. I'm not in danger in my house. And so what you brought to me was an image of me as a very small girl. I think it was in France, if you can recall. And I'd gotten on a horse and I'd been bucked off. And a little while ago in our talk, maybe half hour ago, you said you'll go into something and you'll see images or sensations. Yeah. Do you remember how that image came to you, or how that memory came?
Yeah, so I saw, and it's something where it came kind of out of the blue.
Yeah.
I just connected in, opened up, and I saw you. I just saw a horse take off. And I saw you on the back of the horse, and I saw you fall off, and I felt it too. I mean, there's an experience too of like empathically feeling what is going on as that happens, and that it was, traumatizing for you in that experience. And again, I just knew it was you. I knew that this was you in a different lifetime, a different place, and that this trauma was unresolved.
Exactly. And so what came from that was, so I wasn't supposed to have done that as this little girl. And clearly I wasn't the same little girl I am now. It's different parents, different, structure, but the soul, the energy was there. And back in the day, I can't remember when it was, but it was a while ago. I was just kind of left, in a room with no help, because at that time you couldn't do anything with injuries. And I was sort of left a cripple. And there was a lot of pain. Remember, like there was a lot of physical pain, and you know, again, with someone that has an injury, even on a good day, there might be a lot of physical pain. And so what came to me when you, and again, this is where then I brought this into my own system. You didn't tell me what to do. But I thought, well, so here I am as this little girl, injured. I know it was my own fault. So there was pain in that, right? Emotion. And in this life, I let that emotion through. But then I thought to myself, well, I'm trained in this lifetime with working with Feldenkrais. I know how to help injuries. I know how to help take the shock out of the system. I know how to hold the brain stem, how to do this touch to bring ease to the body. And so I imagined myself in that room, and I, you know, it was dark, it was wood, it was not very nice, it wasn't comfortable, working with her. And the moment, Janet, I went to touch her head and softly roll it, I just broke down crying.
Wow.
It was just this grief and this but relief. She just felt cared for and held, because no one gave a shit about her. It was like, she's gonna die, we have no resources for her. And so I worked with it and I worked with it. What was interesting is that it did take that tension away, but then it came back. And then I had to have a chat with her. And actually, Seth helped me with this a little bit, because he understands that. He said, you can't be her babysitter. So what I had to do is I had to not disconnect, but I had to have a boundary. Like, I can't be there all the time holding you, touching you and soothing you, because I'm here, but you're fine. And every now and again, though, if I'm in the bath or if I'm doing something that's more of my physical practice, I'll imagine her there or me with her soaking, because there was no hot water back then to soak in, right? I have little pieces where I will bring her in and be like, fine, I'm still here, but I'm not going to hold your hand through this whole process. So it was fun and healing and emotional. Really interesting.
And it's such a testament too. I mean, we talk in this, you know, here about inner child work a lot, right? Essentially, you're doing some inner child work with you from a different lifetime.
100%. And then it's also a way, it almost makes it easier then to go to your own life now to see, well, how could I have helped that little girl? You know, I broke my arm when I was 5, that had that broken arm, or my teenage years when I had all these whiplashes with skating and skiing that I was frozen to, didn't even know they were happening. It's like, wow, I must have been in a lot of pain after that accident, but I had no way to know it because I was shut down. So it's fascinating. So for those listening, like, the layers here are so fun.
They're
fun.
They really are.
I think we've covered a lot. I think we could probably talk for 5 hours. Maybe we'll talk again. What are you doing, Janet, right now? Like, I know that you're starting to do more group, but if someone wanted to work specifically on these things, what are you starting to create in your practice, in your business, to help people with this stuff? If you could just speak to that.
So I do still, I do offer sessions that work with this. You know, I have energy healing sessions, which is very specific to the energetic level of it, which, you know, we can address some of the nervous system work on the energetic level. Not all of it. So there's often a follow-up in which I refer people to you, and, you know, or whatever they might need. If they need emotional work, whatever, there's usually something beyond that. That's one way. And another way that I work with it is I do a type of healing work that is more like a guided meditation, where I take the person into you know, a space where they're able to connect with their higher selves, and then go into either early childhood work or past life work. And we can be very intentional with that. But we also ask, you know, where do I need to go? Where is the origin of this? And a lot of times it is to a past life. And then I'm there facilitating with the person as they go through this process, accessing the energy of that lifetime, bringing up the emotions, emoting what's appropriate emote in that moment, and then going through some of the ways of just sort of, having some resilience through that experience.
Yep.
And coming back. So there's a couple different ways to approach it. And a lot of times what happens is we do an energetic session, and then it's like, oh, there's something that needs some deeper work here. And then we'll go into that other type of session to really pinpoint and bring the focus to what wants to be healed.
Great. Love it. And you are 100% trauma informed. So I think it's really important, because there are many people, from what I've experienced, who do this level of psychic soul work. And I felt that when they're not regulated in their system, it feels a little dangerous. It doesn't feel very foundational.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, that's why we're obviously having this conversation, and why we do lots of referring back and forth, is that having that groundedness in the physical, knowing that it's a real thing. You can't deny the need to take care of the physical body and the nervous system. And what I found, and I think you maybe feel this in the work you do, that when someone has that, the work is a little smoother. Like, there's a different trust.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I get a lot of people come to me who have had, not great experiences with other healers who are regulated, or who have not healed enough of their own trauma, right?
Exactly.
To be able to hold that space.
Yeah. Perfect. Cool. Well, this has been exciting. For everyone watching, thank you for sticking to the end. It's been a longer interview and chat, but I like that we kind of dabbled in all the different places and spaces. There were a lot of resources, so I'll track them and put them all down below. If you think of anything resource-wise after the fact when we hang up, let me know. And thank you. I'm so glad that we met in this lifetime.
Me too. Thank you. All right.
Bye, Janet.
Bye.